The ship Aurora Star slowed as it came close to a shining blue planet that looked calm from space. Inside, Commander Luke Carter watched through the glass window as clouds moved slowly under them. This was his first time visiting this world, and even though the mission sounded peaceful, could feel a strange tension in the air. He had been sent here to speak for his people, but he had also heard stories about the two strange sisters living on this planet, women who looked human but seemed to see everything as a game. Luke was calm on the outside. He always looked calm. Years of training had taught him how to wear that still face, even when his heart beat fast. He straightened his uniform, checked his note tablet one last time, and breathed slowly. The ship's doors opened with a soft sound, and warm wind touched his face as he stepped down to the landing field. Waiting for him were two women who seemed to shine in the afternoon light. They looked so alike that someone seeing them for the first time might think they were mirrors. Their hair moved with the wind, their eyes bright like polished glass. They smiled as he approached, but their smiles did not feel friendly. It was the kind of smile that hides something behind it. Lyra, the older twin, was the first to speak. Her voice was smooth, soft, but had a trace of laughter in it. "Welcome, Commander Carter. You must have had a long trip. We hope you can keep up with us even without a translator." Her sister Celine gave a quiet laugh. "He looks strong," she said in a voice that sounded sweet but carried a teasing tone. "But can he understand anything we say?" Luke bowed politely. "I believe we will understand each other," he said with a calm smile. The sisters exchanged a quick glance. They whispered something to each other in low voices, then laughed again, thinking he would not understand. Luke did not react, simply stood still, studying their faces as if he did not notice their behavior. What they did not know was that he understood every word. For years he had studied many languages from different regions beyond Earth. He liked to listen quietly first before showing people what he knew. As they led him through the bright hall toward their meeting room, he could hear them continue to whisper to each other. They said he looked too serious for someone so young. They said humans often tried to look wise but were actually simple. They laughed at the way he walked, at his plain clothes, even at his short answers. Luke said nothing. He smiled politely when they looked back, pretending he thought they were simply talking about the weather. Inside the meeting hall, everything shone like glass. The light bounced on the floor and walls, filling the room with a soft glow. There was a long table made of silver stone and chairs cut in smooth shapes. Luke could see his reflection in the floor under him. The two sisters sat across from him, their hands moving in graceful ways as they talked. They asked about Earth. They asked about the journey. Then they spoke quietly to each other again, covering smiles behind their hands. Luke answered their questions one by one, always patient, never showing that he understood the jokes hidden between their words. Whenever they looked at him in surprise at how calm he was, he just nodded and waited for the next question. It went on for some time. He started to see that their teasing was not meant to hurt, but to test him. They wanted to see if he would break first, if he would get upset or show pride. Maybe this was their way of deciding if he could be trusted. When the conversation ended, the younger sister stood and said with a playful grin, "Our mother expects you at dinner tonight. I hope you like our food and our humor, Commander." Luke stood as well, slightly nodding. "Thank you. I'm sure I will." They both smiled again, though this time their smiles seemed a little sharper, like thin glass edges. They turned and left the room together, whispering as they went. When Luke was alone, he let out a short breath and looked out through the wide glass window. The sky outside burned orange and gold as the sun began to set behind tall mountains. He could see shadows move across the fields where small glowing plants swayed gently in the breeze. It was beautiful, peaceful, and yet full of quiet challenge. He knew what the sisters were doing. He knew they tried to measure him, to make him slip and show weakness. That was fine by him. Had come here not only to talk, but also to understand what kind of people they truly were. They thought of him as just another visitor, thought of them as teachers who did not yet realize their lesson would turn back on them. Luke smiled faintly to himself. "Let them laugh for now," he whispered. "Let them think I know nothing." The night air outside grew darker. The Aurora Star's metal wings shone faintly under the soft lights from the city below. Tomorrow would bring the grand dinner. He could already imagine the sisters' laughter across the table. But soon, when he spoke in their own tongue, that laughter would quiet like a flame touched by rain. The evening came slowly, like a long breath. The sky outside was colored in soft gold and red. The big hall where the dinner was held looked more like a dream than a real place. Lights floated high above the tables, shining like warm stars. The air was full of scents from fruits and strange flowers that opened only at night. Music played somewhere far away, low and light, almost floating in the air. Commander Luke Carter walked into the hall with calm steps. His uniform was simple but neat, made from dark cloth that reflected a little of the light. All around him, people from the planet moved with quiet grace. He noticed how they watched him, a mix of curiosity and quiet judgment in their eyes. He had come here with a small group, but tonight he sat alone among them. It was meant to show trust, though it also meant he was surrounded by people who could test him at any moment. Lyra and Celine arrived last, dressed in clothes that shimmered like flowing water under the lights. The whole hall seemed to pause for a moment when they entered. The sisters moved with the same rhythm, each step matching the others, like they shared a single thought. When they smiled, people smiled back, partly out of admiration and partly out of fear of offending them. As Lyra greeted the guests, she stopped by Luke's seat. "Commander Carter," she said, her tone gentle but sharp under the surface. "I hope our food will not be too strong for your simple taste." Before Luke could answer, Celine leaned close and added softly, "Do humans even eat food that glows?" Both sisters shared a small laugh before moving to their seats across from him. Luke looked at them, still smiling slightly, pretending not to understand the teasing edge that hid between their words. The meal began. Bowls of colorful dishes filled the table. The food looked like some mix of art and science shapes that shimmered and changed color in the soft air. Decorations sparkled like glass, and every plate reflected the faces of those sitting around it. People lifted their cups and spoke in voices as smooth as the music playing far away. Lyra took the lead in speaking to the guests, but even as she talked, she often turned to whisper to Celine in a quick language unknown to most of the humans present. Each time they whispered, their eyes flicked toward Luke with a glimmer of amusement. They were certain he could not understand. Luke acted the part of the polite guest. He listened, nodded, and even laughed at the right moments when the others did. When Celine raised a question about human cities, he answered patiently, describing the tall towers, bright streets, and the ocean roads. Lyra translated his words for the others, but she twisted them slightly, slipping in little mistakes that made him sound clumsy. A few people chuckled quietly. Luke caught the tone, but he kept his calm. He even took a sip of the clear drink before him and smiled warmly. "Your translation is very interesting," he said, his voice friendly but with a spark in it. "It's almost poetic." Lyra blinked, unsure if he was mocking her. Before she could reply, Celine spoke again, asking more questions, each one meant to make him stumble. Luke answered them all with quiet certainty, though inside he was waiting for the right moment. He had learned long ago that patience could be sharper than any weapon. The dinner stretched on with songs, laughter, and tiny sparks of light dancing in the air. Eventually, the sisters began to relax. They leaned close to each other, talking rapidly in their own tongue again. "He is polite," Lyra whispered, though her voice still held that teasing edge, but a little slow. "I wonder if he even understands half of what is happening tonight." Celine sighed with a laugh. "He looks serious, but that might just be confusion disguised as manners." Luke heard every word, of course. His calm expression never changed, though a small smile touched the corner of his mouth. He rested his hands lightly on the table, his eyes watching them as if he were simply enjoying the music. When Celine finally turned back to him, she said, "I hope this gathering has been comfortable, Commander." "It has been quite beautiful," Luke said easily. "Your home, your culture, your sense of humor, everything is unique." He let the last words glide smoothly into their own language, his pronunciation perfect. It was short, just a greeting and a polite thank you, but it was enough. Both sisters froze. Their bright eyes widened as if the air around them had suddenly turned cold. The whole room quieted, unsure what had happened. Only the soft notes of the distant harp continued. Lyra opened her mouth as if to ask a question, but no sound came out. Celine simply looked at him. Disbelief and surprise painted across her face. Luke smiled kindly, his eyes full of calm warmth. "It has been a wonderful evening," he said again in their tongue, his tone smooth and respectful. Then he added in his own language, "I have enjoyed every word spoken tonight." Lyra and Celine just stared at him, silent and motionless. Luke lifted his cup and took another sip of the glowing drink, as if nothing unusual had happened. The guests around the table began to whisper quietly. Somewhere in the silence, the faint sound of the sisters' laughter had turned into stunned stillness. The quiet stretched long. Luke placed his cup down gently and looked across the table, meeting their shocked eyes with his steady calm. The game, he thought, had just changed. The great hall was silent for a long moment after Luke spoke. The bright lights that floated above the table seemed to dim a little, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The sound of the music had faded. Only the soft hum of the air could be heard. Everyone waited for the sisters to respond, but they did not. Lyra looked at him as if she had seen a ghost. Celine sat still, her lips slightly parted, her eyes searching for words that would not come. Luke felt the eyes of everyone in the hall turn toward him. His voice had not been loud, but his words had carried clearly across the long table. He could sense the mix of confusion and wonder spreading among the guests. He remained calm, his hands resting on the table, his expression polite but steady. Inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Lyra was the first to find her voice. "Commander," she said softly, her tone no longer sharp, "you speak our language?" Luke nodded calmly. "Yes," he said. "Right. I thought it would be respectful to learn it before visiting your home." Celine blinked several times before speaking. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you understood us?" "Since the moment I arrived," Luke said. His eyes never left theirs. "I listened because I wanted to learn what was behind your smiles." The two sisters exchanged a quick glance, and for the first time their faces showed more surprise than control. Lyra lowered her eyes, her fingers tracing slow circles on the table. Celine looked down too, her proud expression slowly fading. The room remained silent for a few more seconds before quiet talk began again among the other guests. Luke leaned slightly forward. "I did not mean to embarrass you," he said gently. But it seemed fair to speak openly after listening quietly. Lyra looked up again, her voice much softer than before. "You could have told us," she said. "We would have spoken differently." Luke gave a small smile. "Perhaps, but then I would not have seen who you truly are." Celine frowned faintly. "And what do you think you have seen, Commander?" Luke thought for a moment before answering. "I saw two strong people who used laughter to test others. You wanted to see if I would break, or if I would hide behind formality. I respect that. It means you care about who stands before you." A long silence settled again. Then quietly, Lyra began to laugh. It was not the sharp laugh from before, but a lighter one, warm and almost thoughtful. Celine smiled slowly too, though still unsure whether to be amused or impressed. "You are strange, Commander," Lyra said. "Most would be angry after being mocked." Luke shrugged slightly. "Anger gives nothing. But patience teaches much." That earned him another small laugh. The tension in the air began to fade. The music returned softly, filling the room again with light sounds. People returned to their meals, though many still stole quick glances toward the three of them. Something in the balance of the evening had shifted. Celine leaned back in her seat, her expression thoughtful. "You must be intelligent indeed, Commander. To learn another language so well takes time." "It takes interest," Luke replied, "and maybe a little curiosity." Lyra studied him for a long while, her eyes now calm and wise. "So you have been listening," she said. "All our words, all our jokes?" "Yes," said Luke. "Every one of them, and you still sit here, still smiling?" she asked with a trace of surprise. Luke's voice was steady, because none of it was cruel. "You only tested me. Now we know each other more honestly." For a moment, Lyra looked like she might speak again, but instead she sighed and gave him a small nod. The sisters said nothing more for the rest of the dinner. They sat quietly, speaking with other guests, their voices lower and more thoughtful than before. When the evening ended, they stood at the entrance as the guests began to leave. The air outside was cool, filled with the sound of soft wind moving through hanging lights. Luke stepped forward to say goodbye. Lyra met his gaze for a short moment, and her expression was no longer mocking. There was respect there now, mixed with curiosity and something new. "We misjudged you," she said at last. "Few visitors ever learn our ways. Perhaps we needed to be surprised." Luke gave a small nod. Perhaps surprise is part of diplomacy. Celine gave a faint smile as well. "Tomorrow there will be another meeting," she said. Come to the gardens in the morning. We may start again, properly this time. Luke bowed his head slightly. I would like that, he said. As they turned away, the glow of the lamps painted their shapes in soft light, and the night grew quiet again. Luke stood for a moment under the open sky, feeling a sense of balance return. The stars above him looked near enough to touch, and the air carried a calm scent. He smiled to himself as he walked back toward the landing field. The tests, the laughter, the silence, all of it had been worth the wait. He had not just won their respect, it opened the door to something far more valuable: understanding. He knew the next day would bring new challenges, but for now, he felt a peaceful certainty in his heart. The quiet power of truth had spoken where pride once ruled, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The morning came bright and clear after the strange dinner. The soft light spread slowly over the city as the sun climbed above the silver hills. Commander Luke Carter had slept little, his thoughts chasing through the night like waves. He was not troubled, only thoughtful. The sisters had invited him to meet them again in the gardens, and he knew that this meeting would not be simple greetings. Something had changed between them, something quiet but deep. He walked through long, bright halls made of glass and light, where water flowed under the floors. The gardens lay beyond a wide archway, where vines hung low, moving softly in the morning breeze. The air smelled fresh, full of life and faint sweetness. When Luke stepped into the open, he saw Lyra and Celine waiting near a fountain that sent water rising and falling like silver rain. They no longer wore the shining clothes from the dinner. Instead, their outfits were simple, soft, and light. Lyra saw him first and smiled, though her smile was gentle this time. "Good morning, Commander," she said as he came closer. "It seems your sleep was short." Luke smiled back. "I had a busy mind," he said. "It happens when good lessons are learned." Celine looked at him closely. "Lessons?" she repeated. "You think last night was a lesson?" "Yes," said Luke. "For me, and for you too, I think." The two sisters exchanged a quiet glance. Then Lyra gestured to a stone bench by the fountain. "Please," she said, "sit with us. We want to speak without the noise of the hall." Luke sat down. Drops of water from the fountain sparkled in the air around them. Birds with long tails moved between the trees, singing in short, bright sounds. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lyra broke the silence. "We were not kind at first," she said honestly. "You saw that? We laughed when we should have listened. We thought you were another proud visitor pretending to be polite. I did notice your laughter," Luke said with a small smile. "But I understood it." "Still," said Celine quietly, "it was wrong." Luke shook his head. "It was human," he answered. "Sometimes we test people before trusting them. I have done the same, just in quieter ways." Lyra studied him, her bright eyes thoughtful. "You were calm the whole time," she said. "Even when we tried to make you feel small. Control is easy when you know the truth," Luke said softly. "You cannot be made small unless you believe you are." That made the sisters smile a little. The air between them grew lighter. After a while, Celine asked, "Why did you learn our language in secret?" "Most visitors use translators. It is easier." Luke looked at the water and watched it shine under the sun. "Because language is not just sound," he said. "It is thought. When you speak in your own tongue, your heart speaks with you. I wanted to hear your hearts, not just your voices." Lyra nodded slowly. "And you did," she said. "You heard more than we meant to share." "I heard truth," Luke said, "and pride, and humor. None of that is wrong. But I also heard loneliness in some of your words." The sisters glanced at each other again. Celine looked away for a moment. "Our world is peaceful," she said. "We have beauty and comfort, but peace can be heavy when nothing challenges it. Visitors like you remind us that there is still something to learn." Luke smiled at that. "And you remind us that learning does not end with power or travel. It ends when listening stops." They sat together quietly for a while. The wind moved through the garden, carrying small petals across the fountain. Somewhere far off, bells rang softly. Lyra stood and walked a few steps toward the edge of the garden, where the view opened into wide valleys of gold and green. "The council meets today," she said. "You must decide if trust will stand between your people and ours. I will speak for you. You trust me now?" Luke asked gently. Lyra turned her head and smiled faintly. Enough to listen to you, she said. Celine stood as well. And enough, she added, to hope that your words may open something better for both sides. Luke rose too, feeling warmth in his chest. He looked at them, their figures bright against the morning light, and he felt something rare in the air around them: balance, understanding, and quiet respect. Lyra took a small silver leaf from a branch and held it out to him. A sign of peace, she said. It is a reminder of mornings that begin with honesty. Luke took it carefully and nodded. Then let this morning stay remembered, he said. They began to walk toward the far gate of the garden together. The path curved under trees and passed over little streams that caught the sunlight. As they walked, they spoke of things more personal, their pasts. The first time each had seen the stars, and how laughter could sometimes be armor for the heart. By the time they reached the end of the garden, the distance between them was gone. The cold sharpness from the night before had turned into quiet friendship. Before they parted, Celine looked at Luke with a small smile. You surprised us once, she said. I wonder if you will do it again. Luke laughed softly. I might, he said, but only if it helps. Then they went their separate ways under the soft light of the new day. The city shone beyond the gardens, alive and waiting. In that calm morning, trust had begun to grow like the flowers around them slowly, quietly, but with strength that could not be broken. The day of the council began with quiet rain. Soft drops fell from a gray sky and touched the wide glass roofs of the city. Commander Luke Carter stood by the tall window of his guest room, watching the light shimmer across the surface. He had been through many meetings in his life, but something about today felt special. The talk in this council would decide whether the people of both worlds would trust each other enough to work together. He dressed in a clean uniform, tucked in his notes, and stepped out into the long corridors that led to the council building. Houses and gardens looked calm after the rain. The air smelled bright and pure. When he reached the great hall, the twin sisters were already there, standing side by side at the long curved table in the center. Lyra nodded when she saw him. Celine smiled slightly, the same quiet smile she had used in the garden the day before. Good morning, Commander, Lyra said. Are you ready? As ready as I can be, Luke replied. It is a good day to begin again. People filled the hall slowly. Representatives from many groups arrived, each sitting in their own section. The air buzzed with careful talk. Some were curious about Luke, and others were unsure if trust was wise. The sisters stood at the front, waiting for silence to settle before speaking. Lyra's voice carried across the room, gentle but strong. We gather today not to compare power, she said, but to speak as equals. The visitor before us has shown patience, honesty, and skill. He learned to listen before he spoke. That is the sign of true understanding. Luke listened, his heart steady but thoughtful. He remembered the first time he had met them, the laughter, the teasing then how that had turned into real respect. Words, he thought, had the power to move more than armies. Celine stepped forward next. We laughed when he arrived, she said with quiet truth. We thought his silence meant weakness. We were wrong. He taught us that silence can hold more strength than noise. We believe an alliance with his people should be made. Her words brought a wave of murmurs through the room. Luke waited until the sound faded before stepping to the front. His voice remained calm. When I first came here, he said, I carried rules and plans. But what I found was better than any plan. I found honesty. What began as mistrust became respect. Our worlds can share that same path if we allow it. He paused, letting his words sink into the still air. We have different ways of speaking, he continued, but the same wish to live, to learn, to go forward. If we start from truth, then peace will follow. The council listened. Some whispered to each other, some nodded slowly. The rain outside had stopped, and light began to pour through the high windows, filling the hall with gold. It felt as though the world itself was watching. The leader of the council asked a few questions about trade and safety. Luke answered simply, clearly, with no hidden meanings. He did not make big promises. He only promised honesty. Lyra and Celine gave their support to each point he made, and soon the talk became warm and steady instead of cold and hard. Finally, the council leader stood and lifted a thin white stone into the air, a sign of agreement. The vote is complete, the leader said. The partnership is accepted. A quiet cheer rose through the room. People smiled. Some even laughed with relief. Lyra turned to Luke, her eyes bright. It is done, she said. Your patience has brought us here. Luke exhaled slowly, feeling the weight leave his shoulders. Our patience, he said. I could not have done this alone. Celine reached across the table and placed her hand over his for a brief moment. Then let the peace begin with us, she said. Outside, the clouds broke apart completely, and sunlight filled the city with warmth. The golden light reflected on the glass roofs and ran down the quiet streets like a river. Luke, Lyra, and Celine stepped out of the hall together, letting the light fall on their faces. People outside cheered when they heard the news. Flowers were thrown from balconies. Children ran through the streets laughing. It was not only a new agreement between worlds, but also a moment that reminded everyone that even pride could change into friendship. Luke looked at the twins, who now smiled with true joy. Said softly, When we first met, I was the stranger you mocked. Now I stand beside friends. Lyra laughed lightly. You deserved a little teasing, she said. But it seems you knew more than we ever guessed. Only enough to listen, Luke replied. They walked together through the open courtyard, where tall silver trees swayed in the soft wind. Around them, people celebrated with quiet songs and bright decorations. The sunlight shimmered through the branches, painting colors on their faces. Lyra stopped and turned toward him. You will not be forgotten here, she said. Your words will stay with us long after you leave. Luke smiled. Then your laughter will stay with me. It has taught me more than you know. Celine laughed gently and said, We will try to laugh with kindness from now on. Luke nodded. It would suit you well. The day ended with peace signed and hearts lighter than they had been for a long time. As the sun set behind the distant hills, Luke looked back once before returning to his ship. He saw the sisters standing at the gates, their white robes moving softly in the wind, waving goodbye. The engines hummed quietly as the ship rose into the orange sky. Beneath him, the land shone with light and calm. For the first time, Luke felt that the long path of unity had truly begun, not through power or command, but through the simple strength of understanding and the courage to listen.